Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Selectboard meeting for March 3rd, and if you would welcome me, if you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would like a motion for the minutes of the February 4th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Public comment. Nobody's jumping at that. 3, Public Works Department. John, tell us a story.
Good story or a bad story? Good story. Winter's almost done, hopefully. But during the past few months, we've been really doing winter maintenance, which includes plowing and sanding. We've been busy moving haul snow off Main Street and off the parking lots to make room for further storms. We've been pushing roads back as needed to really view and town routes with small trucks with a loader. First that wing plowing on the loader helps a lot. Makes better turns. You know, about 20 feet out in front of you, rear, trying to push stuff back. We've got new employees beginning to learn the routes, and right now we're pretty proficient at it. We're much training. We show them, selling what we'll crews ride with them, teach them how to get it, the routes and everything else. So we do it pretty well. To date, we had 30 winter-related events, about 45 inches of snow. 6 of these storms ended with the freezing rain or sleet. We also did a winter prep, so Christmas prep. Christmas tree up, and the decoration committee decorated, and we removed decorations, and we lights off the tree and took the tree down. Around the town, we allowed. We're cutting brush, we're Tom Street, not on the list, we also did some Walk Hill, Lake Road, and Orchard Drive. Also getting a lot of branches down throughout the town, which is the one who was too low to go on to doing damage to vehicles. Go out and cut those after the snow's over. We posted the roads, so we probably posted. The frosties will come up. We're trying to keep the top of it, we're filling the eaves and low spots with sand and putting bump signs up, trying to lessen the impact on the vehicles we move on. And potholes we treat as needed with full batch. We got our 2013 West Star back in service. It's been out all winter pretty much. We're going to get it back in service. It seems to be working well this time. Our sidewalk machine. From Osgood's replacement tractor. It's in Osgood's, but it's not ready for us to use it yet. You got to modify it still to let attachments fit on it, snowmobile, let a sweeper on it. That takes some time. We're still waiting for the valve body to come in order to allow electron hydraulics to for our sweeper. And that's not supposed to be done until May. So, actually been using a loaner tractor for Osgood's, which would make our life a lot easier rather than renting one or doing both, taking the grid out every time. It's a little more challenging, but it works. The new trucks come in, the 2 new trucks, those are up in service, running good. No breakdowns, no issue with them at all. We would like to eventually in the summertime change sand control. Right now we have manual controls. And our previous trucks had the next control, so that regulates the amount of salt that comes out. That will speed up the salt coming fast and slow down. The salt slows down without actually physically moving the dial. And it regulates the salt a lot better. So it's something to look into. We tried to do it when the trucks were set up, but it was too late when the process being set up. And at this point, we're looking forward to spring cleanup and spring comes and continue plans for road maintenance for some spring and summertime.
How are you, do you know, on your salt and sand use this year compared to last?
Sand, we have plenty of sand still. Salt, we're right on task. So we're doing good salt.
Anyone have any questions for John? Okay.
So with the sidewalk machine,
Yes.
what are the plans for the equipment that has been flushed? Are they gonna replace we plan on replacing the hydraulics or?
We need to meet with
Okay.
her and discuss that. I was away on vacation, so I didn't set it up. But that's our next step. We haven't done anything, we haven't talked to them, anything. So and then the whole board will need to meet and iron all that out. It's, we know we're ready to. We knew we weren't in like a emergency hurry because it is still taking time, but we want to meet with her right off.
Great, thank you.
Make a motion to accept the report?
Second?
We have a motion and a second to accept the report. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Moving on. Thank you, John. To the Forster Mill final closeout. Public meeting. You want me to keep reading? Public meeting. Rhonda?
Yep. Jaime and Nick from Ransom are here, which they can actually come on up front, please.
Come on down.
Come on down, we can get, if we need a table to bring here.
Watch the,
So
Thing on the
what they're
floor there.
going,
I just don't want them tripping on that.
they're going to do the discussion of the cleanup actions that were performed at the Forster Mill site, the current status of the site, potential redevelopment, reuse options. And this afternoon, we also held an on-site workshop meeting with 3 representatives from DEP about what DEP requires for redevelopment of the site. So, turn it over to Nick.
Thanks, Rhonda. So we've had, as you will recall, several meetings during the course of the Forster cleanup project that's been funded through various sources that I'll describe. And as part of that process, there is the requirement to have a public meeting like this. So we if you recall, we had a public meeting early in the project when when Wilton had first received funding from EPA, and then we had another public meeting when we had selected the contractor that was going to do the work, and they talked about the types of equipment that they'd have on site and the type of work that was proposed to be done. And this is kind of a wrap-up meeting. We've been very fortunate to have, in our opinion anyway, a contractor that's been able to have consistency on the project through 2 pretty large phases of work. And in our interaction with them, we feel that they did everything that they said they were going to do and created a nice project. For those that weren't part of some of those earlier meetings, there was a lot of different funding sources over the course of this project. Initially, the main DEP Brownfields Assessment Program that has their own assessment funds through EPA funded a phase 1 that we completed, a hazardous building materials inventory. TRC did some phase 2 work, and they created a feasibility plan, which is that acronym, the ABCA, the Analysis of Brownfields Cleanup Alternatives. And through that $82,000 that DEP contributed, we were able to abate the boiler room in its entirety. We removed all the hazardous and universal waste that was kind of strewn throughout the site from prior owners. And we were able to do the historic preservation piece, which was with the state of Maine. So those funds were well used. AvCog after that came in, and we needed to do some additional characterization of the roof. So the Interscoggin Valley Council of Governments contributed $25,000, and then in that fall of, so it would have been 2015, Rhonda, is when you submitted your first $200,000 grant, because that was a financial year 2016 award. So in 2016, Wilton was officially awarded their first brownfields cleanup for the site of $200,000. That was a grant from EPA. At a similar time, we knew that that first phase of work was going to be more than that. So Rhonda was able to secure $200,000 through the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And that took us to that first phase. As you recall, the freestanding wall came down and all the buildings were standing that were left prior to this second phase, which was funded by AvCog in a $300,000, $150,000 grant, $150,000 loan. And also, Rhonda was successful again with DECD to receive grant and loan funding from DECD for $200,000. So it's a pretty significant effort that was completed, and you know, we're here in part to talk later on tonight about that's left, and so it's, you know, in my experience anyway, on projects like this, it's pretty rare that you have money left. And so somewhere in the range of $110,000, $120,000 are left that we can discuss later, how you all may want to use that or not use that. Jaime's going to provide us with a little bit of a summary on where we are with DEP and the closeout process.
All right, so to give everybody a quick project summary of what's been done, I think everyone's very well aware of it, but for those in the audience who are not, as Nick said, we started back in 2016. At that time, we had done an analysis of brownfields cleanup alternatives. So with those federal funding mechanisms, we had to evaluate different remedial options for the hazardous materials that we knew that were on site. So we went through this process and we determined that asbestos abatement with the building demolition was going to be necessary, that it was necessary to demolish that building to safely access and get rid of the hazard that existed. So with that came a Section 106 historic review. So the building was a historic building. It was over 100 years old, so there were some steps that we had to do to make sure that was recorded properly. And again, as Nick had mentioned, that was funded through the DEP brownfields. That was something that was funded through a different funding mechanism. Then once we got into the actual design and the cleanup, as Nick said, we abated asbestos. We removed asbestos in roofing materials. All of the windows had asbestos material. About 75% of the roof on that whole structure had asbestos in it as well. And inside the building there was a lot of pipe insulation, there was some flooring, there was some insulation on the walls, and that all got abated and properly disposed of and removed from the site. Then we demolished the building. Again, for those who aren't that familiar, and I can turn this for the camera. It was done in 2 phases. I don't know if you want to hold it up. Okay.
Do we show it that way or show it to you guys?
You guys are in.
Show it that way.
Yeah, let him get it with the camera.
Okay. So the first phase was the phase in the front. So the building that went along Depot Street, that freestanding wall was sort of looming over the river. That was done as the first phase. As Nick had said, that was funded through an EPA cleanup grant and through a DECD loan. Then we sort of stopped for a couple of months, regrouped, got some more funding, and we went after this section in the back that was constructed over the river in this back section where the boiler rooms formerly were. So the 2 phases of work were completed this past summer. That seems like a long time ago. It was this past summer. Again, as we said, it seemed like it was a slow process because we've been doing it so long, but they did finish on schedule, and we finished considerably under budget. So that was a really wonderful thing for all of us to see. At all times during the demolition, Ransom Consulting, who was hired by the town, did oversight to make sure that dust was controlled, so we didn't have any issues with dust impacting adjacent residences or people, cars going by, and we also made sure that there was no issues with erosion control of it being directly on Wilson Street. So as any of you who have driven by the site now know, the site is completely vacant. There are still concrete slabs in place. Some of those are remnants of the old buildings, the sides of the foundation walls. They're too close to the road to remove without further assessment. And some of them, again, are adjacent to the stream. But at this point, that's all that remains. It's pretty much a vacant site that is ready for redevelopment or site reuse.
We are in the process right now of closing out the project, which is kind of a big process. You can imagine with all this federal funding, there's a lot of paperwork that needs to be done to close out those grants. We're writing a VRAP closure report, which we have submitted. The DEP has reviewed it. There are a couple of comments, so we're in the process of finalizing that process. There are two things that need to happen. We need to still enter the site into the main Voluntary Response Action Program. It's the VRAP. And that's the state regulatory, it's a release of protection, or a liability protection. So the site will be entered into that program. And then there are some declaration of environmental covenants that go with the site, which basically just say that anybody who digs on the site in the future, any redeveloper who comes on the site in the future, has to make sure that they understand that there's a potential that they might encounter contamination. Even though we've done a cleanup on the site, because of the industrial past, kind of it's a safety factor that we put on the site. It'll have to be done under the oversight of an environmental professional. And that's pretty much where we are in terms of what we've done to where we are to date. And as I said, the site right now is ready for redevelopment, it's ready for reuse planning, and because the project came in under budget, we do have a little bit of money to potentially work with, and that was something we wanted to talk to the board about, some options moving forward. And I think Nick is going to sort of take the lead on this section.
Sure.
Take his mic.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly as Jaime said, we're all at a point in the project where you know, I can't say that you've got a completely blank canvas out there. There's a little bit of concrete and some brick and things like that. But if we look back a couple of years, it's a very different site. And it's a site that has potential to attract future development. And in our experience working on these types of projects, there are a couple different ways that you all can make decisions on how you want to approach that. One option is that in several communities we've worked with the town to create a kind of a response document for developers. So it's a request for proposals from developers, and those types of requests take on many different forms. I mean, we learned some very useful information from the DEP today. So those documents can have an appendix with perceived or anticipated permitting requirements to construct on a site, as an example. If you all have thoughts on portions of the site that you want to see as green space or whatever you might want, or you decide as a group, that can be included in an RFP. And Wilton has had success with this type of process at the tannery. Gardner had success at T.W. Dick. The former Moosehead Manufacturing Mill in Dover Foxcroft had success with a developer. So that's a viable option. Another option, and it speaks to the fact that you do have some money left, is it's a process that requires everybody here and other folks interested in the reuse of this project to have some kind of visioning sessions. And I want to show a few of those to you, and one of them is really close to Wilton here in Canton. So if you spent any time in Canton or maybe driving through Canton, there was a brownfields cleanup that was completed, an EPA-funded brownfields cleanup that was completed on Whitney Brook, the outlet of the lake, and it was a former tannery site. In 2013, that project started. And when I first went and started having discussions with the group of folks that had assembled a little bit of a, I guess you'd call it like a cleanup committee for that site, they really didn't have any appreciation of the process, how they could use the funds, and what the site could be. They knew the site was going to be an inland fisheries and wildlife boat launch site, and we were able to pay for some of those materials with brownfields funds because they were cover. They acted as cover, the concrete planks. But beyond that, they didn't really know too much about what they might want to do. So through several sessions we had, I went up there with just easels and sheets of paper and asked, everybody that attended, the 12 people or so that attended the meeting, what you consider for the site, open space, buildings, commercial space, and we wrote all that out. And that took, a couple hours to do that. And then in a second meeting, we brought in a landscape architect, and he kind of heard what was occurring in the room. And after that meeting, he went back to his office and he created some sketches of what it could be. And, these are obviously very creative people. But, he included pieces of the site that were there, a bridge over the stream, a gazebo, and from these kind of discussions and renderings, the wheels really started to turn. And what happened? He also did this one, which is, this is the lake is over here. The boat launch went in here. The tannery used to sit here, so we used pavement to act as a cover in areas of the site. But the interesting thing that came out of all of this was people started to think about, okay, we understand we need to place cover system in these areas of the site for it to be reused. But a thought they had on the area that it was directly adjacent to Route 108 is they thought in the future there could be somebody that might have interest in developing that site. And so what we actually did was excavated down about 5 or 6 feet, removed any of the contamination, moved it to another area of the site and covered it. Such that in the future, and brought in clean fill here, such that in the future, if this portion of the site was to be redeveloped, a developer could come in and have no, it was a pad-ready, clean site. So I just use that as an example of that process. Another one was in Dover Foxcroft. So this was a large tannery site along the Piscataquis River, and a mill property here. And Dover, Dover Foxcroft wasn't as fortunate as Wilton in having a lot of green space already. I mean, this town has a lot of really nice space. They had no access, believe it or not, to the river in Dover. So again, we worked with a landscape architect, and what they ended up doing was there was a little amphitheater here that they used. They had plantings in this area. They had kind of a mill history area here where they took components out of the mill, and they had signage. And this is a 32-acre site, and it gets a pile of use. This project was completed with a group of folks called the New Jersey Institute of Technology. And NJIT has a contract through EPA. And so they can come to a project, and it costs the grantee, in this case Wilton, no money, because they have a contract, like I say, direct to EPA, and they bill EPA for their time. And they create kind of these design charrettes is what they're termed. And so they'll lead that process. They do a pile of research on, the demographics of a community, potential, and they don't really, they try not to, obviously, they don't want to steer this at all, but they've done this kind of work throughout the country. And not that I'm trying to push them at all on you guys, but it's a good option. It doesn't cost any money. We did, in the Dover Foxcroft example, we brought in the landscape architect because NJIT didn't have that capability. But in Dover, I think we had about 4 of those sessions. And, it's a planning session. So if you and your constituents want to see something built on that site tomorrow, it's not the route for you. That process in Dover probably took 8 or 9, 10 months. They come up, they have these sessions, there's input, they go away, they do renderings, they come back up. But it's a good process, and it happened to work on that project. So those are some of the options that we see for you all at this point, and we're happy to you obviously take any direction that you have on it, but we're happy to answer any questions. And
Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Nick, the New Jersey group, what's the role that you play with them? How do you facilitate that meeting?
Yeah. So
You know the expertise of what's gone on the site, so that's part of what you're arguing.
exactly. Yeah, they look to us for the local expertise of the issues associated with the site. Obviously, having spent
2 years, 3 years.
5 years, 4 years on, 3 years. That, and also, we work in Maine, have worked in Maine our entire careers. They haven't. So I think we've been a good sounding board for them as to, in places that they've worked, it's just clearly not going to work here. On some large site along the Hudson, or a former GE site, and they're building condos, and it's just not necessarily applicable. So we have the opportunity to, I guess you might say, ground them, and but yeah, that's usually been our role. The landscape architect that and there are many, and maybe the town has a relationship with somebody, but we've worked with a bunch too, and so we can make recommendation to that, and or for those services, and we've worked with them too, such that NJI comes up and does the sessions and has, collects all the information, and then the landscape goes off and does their work, and we look at that and review that with them before NJIT looks at it. Yeah.
Rhonda?
I just wanted to know if you could give an overview of today's meeting, is one thing, and I was going to talk a little bit about the finances too.
Sure, definitely. So today we met with 3 representatives of the DEP. I actually had it on my agenda. I was supposed to talk about it, and I got excited and skipped over it. But we talked a lot about setbacks on the stream and what the restrictions on the site would be, and what the opportunities on the site would be. And what we basically were told is that anything within 25 feet of the stream is going to be really hard to do any redevelopment at all unless it's stream restoration. So again, the building has become the edge of the stream, so if we wanted to restore it, that would be one thing. Then between 25 and 75, there are restrictions in redevelopment, but it does not preclude. You can still do redevelopment, it just has to be done under a permit by rule. And then beyond 75 feet, it's really kind of open to the town. So if you kind of look at this map, so we've got 70 feet here. So from the edge of the stream bank, that's it's a really easy to see, right? So it does cut the property, but not even quite in half. So you guys can kind of see this. This line kind of follows the stream here, but it still leaves a really large area of the site that really has unrestricted redevelopment opportunities, and it just means that anything that's done in this area would have to be done under a permit by rule.
But,
I would like you to speak just a minute on the 25-foot, when you say restore.
Sure.
When you say restore, I think build the building back that was there, so I just need you to
Yep.
clarify
when
that.
I'm saying restore the stream bed, it means to a natural state. So as of right now, the site is 100% impervious, which means it's concrete. So restoring would be restoring back to natural conditions. So removing the concrete and going back to green, grass, some sort of wooded vegetation. So that's what I mean by restoring that area within 25 feet. To try to do new development within 25 feet, or to try to modify existing development, so to put parking lots or to try to put a building there, the permitting process is extensive, and there's really no guarantee. It's really frowned upon. So 25 feet is that. There really should be a natural buffer.
Tom?
so in the 25 feet, there are the piers that are there,
Correct.
so they could come out.
So, yeah, we talked about that today quite a bit. So to rip them out and to take the foundations out, again, is a bigger process. To cut them, like to snip them and take the tops off, that would be, it'd be permit by rule, which is the same permit that we were working under when we did the demolition. So there's permit by rules, that are for work adjacent to a natural resource, which is what ours was, so we were doing work adjacent to the river. There are also permit by rules for, I think it's either stream restoration or something, but it would be for taking a concrete, cutting it, and then taking the top off.
So if I may, in that zone, because there is a concrete floor now, it doesn't mean when we restore it that we have to do everything. We could do parts of it, correct? So we could just take out the piers and just say, at this point, unless we get a super $1 million, gazillion dollar grant, there's no way we're gonna take out the concrete that's in the stream.
Yeah.
And it's a better view, and then you could develop the bank back, if you will, 25 feet in kind of a green space. And then from there back, is it a restriction on what you can do within the 25 to 75 feet, or is it just a matter of you have to do a permit by rule?
Permit by rule.
So you could have a building within that zone,
Yes.
correct?
There are certain buildings that are prohibited, but there is development allowed in that area through that process. Can't put salt sheds there, or, there are certain things that.
Oh, damn, that's
that
where
are-
we're gonna put it. But in other words, you could, if we decided we wanted to have a nice office building,
Yep.
we probably could build it by permit by rule within that 25 to 75 feet.
I'm gonna say potentially. I'd have to, again, that there are certain uses that are permitted with a permit by rule on that, and then there are certain ones that are not. And I don't know the answer about specifically an office building. It's something we'd have to look into.
Low-income housing or senior citizen housing or something.
They made a point today that they said almost anything we put back on that site is an improvement to the site, it's
I
an
thought they
improvement
were
to the
saying.
environment, and that bodes well for redevelopment planning. Just all of it has to just go through the process, the approval processes.
We talked a little bit about the cement that's there in place and about what might be under it. They've done the testing on that, so Jaime can kind of touch base on that.
So the concrete that's left is a foundation. There's nothing underneath of it. There's no crawl space underneath of it. Anytime there was crawl space, it got broken, which is why in some places it looks a little rough. What's there now is considered a slab. We did do testing of the soil under the slab as part of our assessments, as the previous assessments, and we found that it did not exceed regulations or the standards for the site's current use. If you were going to rip it up and put residential, we'd have to just go back and double check because the site use has changed. But under the current use, we do know that soil is below standards. There is an environmental covenant that runs with the land that's called a environmental media management plan. It's basically a soil management plan that has conditions that future developers or anybody doing excavation or construction on the site, it's certain steps that they have to follow in the event that anything was identified. Again, we didn't find anything, but it is a site with a 100-year history, so anybody who's doing work in the future in the site is going to just have to follow these. They're pretty basic. It's if you see something unusual, call an environmental professional. If you need to take soil off site, it has to be sampled in accordance with the receiving facility permits. They're really pretty best management practices type things, but it is a document that is going to be recorded with the deed and will run with the property.
So in essence, if you break up the concrete that's there, if I'm a developer and I'm gonna break it up and I gotta put footers down because I gotta put frost walls or whatever, then I'd have to have the soil verified that it in fact is clean, and if I'm moving it off site. So
If
it
you're
does-
moving it off site, you have to verify that it's clean. Depending on what you do with it, that's part of it. Says you have to reach out to an environmental professional like Ransom, and we would make sure that it was managed properly.
So it doesn't, if they did this, broke that, and all of a sudden, oops, you missed a pot. Because you never, my experience at the mill is you never dig on an old mill site. Never, ever. Just build on top. But if they did that and they hit a surprise, then their liability is do they have limit liability, or do they get slammed and now they got to clean that all up and dig forever until it goes away?
It's a great question. So the VRAP does provide limited liability, and Nick could speak a little bit more to the technicalities of that. But the town has done everything that the DEP has asked. The DEP has signed off on all of our assessments, all of our cleanup, and has signed off on the report that we said that this site is
Developed.
cleaned up to standards and is ready for redevelopment under this condition that this soil management is found. And this is exactly why the soil management plan is in place, so that no developer can say,
I didn't know.
they find something, they go, well, doesn't matter, they said it was clean, we don't have to deal with it. We'd have to deal with it properly, but by going through this process, everybody's sort of on the same team, and it's something that we have to work through.
Tiff?
The only thing I'd add to that, Jamie, is that the VRAP, and it's, it's part of the brownfields process. The state wants, or EPA actually wants every cleanup project to go through their state voluntary program, whatever that state might have. So the Voluntary Response Action Program in the state of Maine gives future users and owners the same liability protections that the town of Wilton is going to receive when we submit these documents. So, and those are transferable. So it'll, as Jamie said, it'll transfer with the deed. And so to answer your question, Tom, they will receive those liability protections. These sites receive scrutiny beyond your typical private site, obviously, because they receive EPA and DEP review. I mean, we can, as environmental professionals, we can never say never when you're talking about something in the subsurface, but we're pretty confident on a site like this that's gone through these types of programs.
All right.
So, in addition to the concrete pilings in the stream right now, there's also the two wing walls of what used to be a dam.
Yeah.
If the town decided, my understanding is we could also, permit by rule, ask to take those down. Is there anything else that you foresee that would be advantageous for us to consider?
I mean, I think at this point, it's, depending on what route you go, and I guess regardless of what route you go, anything that you can do to kind of beautify the site and make it more attractive to development. And again, that might be something that you all want to brainstorm on and consider, because that site is way more developable now than it was a year ago.
Way more beautiful.
I mean, it is, and it's, I understand that some of the folks in town may not think that, but it is, and it's way more attractive to a developer. So, exactly the things you're all talking about. If you're able to saw cut some of those pillars and remove them, if you're able to, that example, Tiff, I'm a little bit concerned about, because I think those wing walls are stabilizing a lot of bank on either side, potentially. I don't know, I'm not a structural engineer, but, and to me, that's a little, just kind of off-site, just enough to the extreme boundary of the site, but, if you're able to remove some of those features, if you're able to flatten it out in some areas, I think those improvements to the site could make it that much more attractive. I mean, you could get 5 developers out there that say, those piers are in place, I want to build, like we heard previously. We want to preserve that because we want to have an outdoor restaurant on top of those piers. Well, at the time, that was not a feasible alternative, just given the condition of the flooring and everything else. But some developers might look at that and see that there's structures in the stream and think, well, that's a good thing. We know in viewing the condition of those, it probably isn't. But, I don't know, long way of saying, anything that you guys can envision that if you put your developer hat on that might make you more attracted to that site is something that I think should be considered.
So I have one more question, and you hit on it, the piers. Is it better for the town to own it and get the grants to take it out, or is it better to bring a developer in and said, we've got these, including your bid, what you want to do with them? Does it help us to spend the money to get them out? And because to me, that's the thing on that site that's the most detrimental.
Right.
Is it better, or unless somebody comes in and said, you know what, structurally they're okay.
Right.
So the second part of the question, could they build on it? Would EDP allow them to?
Real short answer,
They don't
could you
know.
build on those piers? I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
Okay,
Between the structural and the permitting and.
so they got to go. So they'll go back to my, is it better for us to try to take them out, or is it better for the potential contractor or whoever might buy it, the developer,
Right.
to let them take it out?
Right. Well, here and now, we don't know how far $120,000 might go on that front. And it's something that you certainly could direct us to do, to try to get some estimates to do that. And the first call would be to the folks that were out there, because they've noodled on this for 3 years. And we did have discussions with them about that, and we knew at the time, given the funding, well, we thought we knew at the time, given the funding, that we expected that they would expend all the entire amount. But it's a discussion that could be easily had with them. Regarding whether it's better for the town or or a private developer to do that, I think the DEP, EPA, DECD, AvCog, everybody that's had money in on this project, I think is really impressed at the work that's been done and the scale of the work that's been done. And so I feel that whenever a municipality takes on the risks like the town did to get this site to where it is, I think DEP is going to do everything they can to make this a simple process. And if they can do that under PBR, or permit by rule, which they say they can, and if your funding is close to that amount, whatever that might be, I think it's something that the town should consider.
It'd be more favorable with their eyes. The town did it. I think
so.
You're right.
I think so.
It's ultimately up to the town, and you've got a little bit of money left. Is it best to use it to clean up those piers? Is it best to use it to do some redevelopment planning? Is it best to just try to do an RFP right now? There's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah.
David?
So is the money, excuse me, is the money left grant or loan?
It's a loan. So about 20,000 is left as a grant through DECD, and then we never touched the remaining $100,000 loan. So it is a loan. We actually just received AvCog's money today, so we received the $150,000 grant today from them and the $150,000 loan from them. And what we've got left is the $100,000 grant through DECD. Of that, we have drawn down 73,000 of that for 73,500 of that 100,000. So there's about 25,000 left there. I know we've got other expenses that have been coming in, and we'll keep going out on that. It's mostly ransom, some of that.
Yeah, so the VRAP closure isn't quite complete yet, so there's going to be a little bit more time on that. There's going to be legal fees with processing the declaration of environmental covenants, and there's going to be fees associated with the VRAP application. So some of that 26 that's remaining it might be a little less than that.
Jeff?
So, in my opinion, I think that, one of the things I like to see is get this back on the tax rolls, and putting it out to RFP without first taking down the structures, the concrete pilings in the river may delay us even further. I think it's worth at least exploring what the cost would be to see if we could get it closer to being a developable
Tom?
site.
I think the same thing. One thing I just asked is that the money that was allocated by the town was to clean up the site. So would we have to, if we have to, that's fine. Go back to the town to say that we've done it, this is what's left, this is what we'd like to do, or are we clean by, as a select board, to make the decision, at least to find out what it would cost to do that?
So with your brownfields grants, they're basically cleanup and redevelopment for all the brownfields grants. We'll just double check to make sure that what's left of the loan, that DEP will allow us to continue to look at redevelopment. But that's, most of the time, that's typically what it is, correct? Yeah.
So
Yes.
I guess I'm in agreement with Tiff. I would like to see us at least find out what it costs to take those things out. Because to me, that's the downside of that site right now. Knowing now that you can get within 25 feet, you get those out. There's somebody would be really interested if they know they had to come in and spend the money to take that out. When we can take it out, I think we can get it back on the tax rolls.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm just gonna real quick, just I've given this paper out before to you, and I just, updated you as to what is there presently. But what we're paying back from the phase 1 is the 200,000 DEP loan. Last year we paid 50,000 of that, so I have a balance of 150. This year we allocated another 50. So we'll be sending that check out before the end of June. So on that 200,000, we'll actually only owe 100 of that first one. And then also by June, the money we just got from AvCog, I budgeted to start repaying 25,000 of that back. So by the end of June, we'll have 125,000 there. And we have not yet used, and that'll be up to you whether you go into using that remaining $100,000 loan, but that has, we haven't touched. Didn't need to, we thought we would.
Tom?
Keith, do we need to put this as a separate agenda item so the public knows that we're going to actually extend this, so that those that might be concerned can come and express their concern? Or can we make a motion tonight to begin the wheels rolling to finding out a bid process, or what it would cost to take that? I guess that's the question. Either way, I want to make it happen.
Yeah.
Just guidance.
This is a public meeting, so I think anybody that was interested could have come.
So-
We did advertise it.
We're not doing anything out of the ordinary.
I would like to make a motion that we ask Nick and his crew to see what it would cost us to take those piers out.
Sure.
I don't know. You have this listed as a public meeting, and we can't
Yeah.
make a motion in a public meeting, but did we really go
Well,
into a public?
It's not a public hearing.
It's not a public hearing.
It's
Okay.
not a public hearing. It's
Okay.
just
That's what I asked.
advertised as a public meeting for Brownfield's sake.
Right.
Okay, because all our meetings are public
It's not
anyway,
a
so that
public
if you, okay, all right.
It's a public meeting, so people can come in here about this.
Phil seconded.
Phil already
I didn't hear
seconded.
anybody. I just-
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
would
he
you
already did.
re-say your motion, please?
Just with that, I would like to ask Nick and crew to give us I give an estimate for us to take the piers out, and then we can decide where we go from there.
Then I still second it.
You still do, thank you for that.
Any other discussion on that motion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
Second thing, if I could, if you could get some more for us to read about this New Jersey Institute, just so that we have a better understanding, because I think in the long run, that may be a path that we do want to go down, which is kind of exciting to me to
Yeah.
have that done. So if you could, not as a motion, but if you could get more information, how they work, how they operate, and how your involvement would be in
Yeah.
that, if that's okay with you.
I would also like to see, not using your pen and marking on the
Yeah.
map, but if you could do something that looked a little better for us on where the 25 feet is, the 75 feet is.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Tiff?
And last, I just want to really thank you guys so much.
Yes.
You've been working with us for years, and to get to this point here is really, really exciting. You've worked hard. You worked right alongside us every single step of the way. So really big kudos and thank yous to you guys.
It's been a great project, and you guys are wonderful to work with. Yeah.
Actually, they went out also today to the former project they worked on, which was the tannery.
Yeah.
That's going pretty good.
Pretty impressive. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a sign-in sheet going
Yeah,
around.
we
If
do.
if you could all sign in and then give that to Rhonda, please.
You need everybody here
Yeah.
in the audience.
James,
Yeah,
I
please.
probably
That's
should.
really good
Yeah.
news. I think I can retire now.
Yeah.
Other-
We can.
We'll take it
And
on.
then it's also want the other map, with the 75 feet.
Yeah.
Just they will carry on.
I'll take this up. Super, thank you. I'll grab that.
Uh-oh, we're gonna get arrested. I told you to pay that traffic bill.
He's been patiently waiting. Kickoff workshop for the engineering of the Wilson Lake Wall.
So I do have a question for you. For Sevee and Maher, I explained this before and they didn't have the meeting with you. Sevee and Maher is the one doing the Wilson Lake retaining wall. And they want to hold a session with the employees. Then they'd like to hold one with the board to get your ideas, very similar to what we just did here. I would like to know what your best timing is for that. They
Not one.
prefer to be one, And I asked, you know, is there a possibility like at 4 in the afternoon or so?
Depends on the day of the week.
Hmm?
Depends on the day of the week.
And what day of the week would you like?
Well,
Like would
Tuesdays tend
next,
to be better for me, but
would next Tuesday work or the following Tuesday before our meeting?
Following Tuesday before the meeting would be better for me, because we're all gonna get into budget season and a lot of days over here and everything, so that would be my preference, since we're gonna be here,
double it up.
double it up, yeah. So it'd be the 17th,
Timing.
4
Four.
o'clock. Said David,
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good. So I'm going to look at that and I'll get it sent out to you, and maybe Phil can help me on calendars that we all get the same, so we're not getting extra dates and stuff here. So we're looking at March 17th. Very good. That's what I need for that.
Okay, Tom?
just so the group and those that are watching at home or whatever, one of the reasons that Tiff and I were very strong on Sevee Maher was these public meetings and the fact that the amount of time they spent talking to the public prior to coming in there to this. So I really want to encourage those people when they hear about these things to participate, because that's why we chose them, because they really want to understand what we want as a community. So very important.
So the very first meetings they're going to do will just be internal. It's not to say somebody can't go by any means. And then they will be
Right.
holding, once they get from the standpoint of town officials looking at, then they want to go back and hold bigger public meetings, and we'll really try to get people out, similar to what we did 10 years ago on the downtown stuff. Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the manager's report.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Jen for having us here, and
Thank you.
like your signage coming in and everything else, and setting up and doing it all. Thank you.
Yeah, but Ben still went through the front. Ben still went through the front door. I saw him.
So the first on my manager's report is the county commissioners meeting. If anybody wanted to attend regarding the not releasing the funds to the two nonprofit associations, which is 10 a.m. on March 17th. So it's still over a month away, but that is the date. So it's actually that same day that we just talked about from Sevee Maher, but that's at 10.
March 17th is over a month away?
Excuse me?
You say March 17th is over a month away?
Oh shoot, it's March now. It's not February.
It really is March 17th, but not
A
over
week
a month
away.
away.
It's
More than a week away.
all right.
2 weeks away from today.
Okay, well, spring's getting here. That's
Just
actually
come on
St.
second time, Luke, that's all.
St. Patrick's Day that day too. Budget meetings, the second one on there will be, I'll send out the dates again, the paper again that I had sent out previously. And that will be, start to be held at the end of March. The very first day that you're getting together is going to be mostly on the nonprofits and social services, and we have a lot this year. So that will be the first night.
Tom?
On the nonprofits, one of the things that, as they come in, that you can tell them if they want to present this, I'd be looking for how many people served in Wilton. I want to know what is their administrative cost compared to their overall budget, and their overhead cost compared to their overall budget.
Administrative costs.
To relate it to their overall budget and their overhead costs, because sometimes overhead does not include all administrative costs. It's very important.
Okay. We'll be sending out an email to them shortly, but we've received a lot of letters, you know, the basic letters asking for the money.
Tiffany?
And if I could add to that list, it's just a couple of things that I typically like to know is there anybody else in the area that's duplicating this service, making sure that we're not duplicating services. And my last question that I like to ask of nonprofits is, what would happen if you were not funded? Is there matching, you know, give us an explanation of how this money is being used.
If I may.
Go ahead.
I just add to that, and then how they're going to use this money to potentially draw down more money. When we did bonds many years ago in the legislature, trying to figure them out, we developed criteria like how many jobs would be created, how much money, if they gave them $1, were they going to turn it into $5? That'd be really important. Or we gave them $1, that's what they basically, we got that service. That would also be very helpful. How do they I mean, I saw something the other day on Foster Tech where the director actually turned a whole bunch of money. She doubled it in 2 years for the able to stroke programs, and I was very impressed with that. So that's the kind of thing. How are they going to use our money to enhance their services and draw down more money?
Okay.
Wow.
First tip was explanation of how.
I've been thinking about this for a while.
They're gonna send a book.
Well, we should see it. If we're going
One
to
way
take
to
that
make sure
responsibility,
there's
I
no
think we should know.
deduplication of
Yeah.
services,
Yeah,
an explanation of how the service, what would happen to the service if it wasn't in this community.
okay.
And it would be, if I may, it
Yes.
would be really nice for us slow people like me, is that they actually would spell that out in their letter. Here's, or like an application that has all of that stuff spelled out rather than just a general letter that we got to weed through and pick it into that. It's almost like, here's the form we'd like you to fill out for us, and you can bring in any other information you want in, but here's the form we need to have so we can make a really clean comparison.
So what we can do is do like a supplemental form with answering these questions and email it out to them and have them
That'd
send
be
us back.
perfect.
Because they've all done their basic letters, which none of this information would be included or anything in that. Okay?
Tiffany,
If I could just go back to the county commissioners meeting on the 17th, they've delayed 2 votes in there that I just want to make the board aware of in case they weren't aware. One has to do with refugees. They listened to the Catholic Charities today and they delayed voting on that, as well as the Farmington selectmen and other selectmen are going to look at the budgeting process and trying to understand why the funds haven't been released. So those are the 2 things that
were they a full board today?
they were not a full board.
Okay.
That's why they delayed the vote today on the refugees as well.
Farmington's going to the March 17th.
That's correct. Farmington's going.
Ready? Nomination papers for Select Board and School Board are available effective yesterday. And I think it says on your paper when they must be returned by.
April 10th,
April 10th. They need to
5
be-
PM.
At 5. And
No extensions.
Right. I
know
wanted to
that
let
for
you
a
know
fact.
that, no extensions. Okay. There
See, I
are-
pay attention.
The 2 seats open are your seats, and I think there is a...
Mr. Fonts.
Mr. Fonce's school board seat is the one that is up this year. Okay. And we will be holding a road committee meeting. I'll set you out the day. We've had a road committee meeting once. John has gone out and gotten prices for the different, or estimates for a lot of the different areas. We kind of want to finalize some things, bring it back to the road committee, get this done before we have the budget meeting. We don't have a date yet, but we'll talk about that on Thursday and then send that out. So I know you're the representative on that, but we'll finalize that with the road committee and have that on the budget part. Okay?
Any other business to come before us tonight? Tom?
Question, I've talked to Russell about going to see the DOT.
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
and I followed up with him and he's got a million things going, but trying to set something up for next week.
Mhm.
And I don't know who said it on this board, but I actually agree with whoever said it, is maybe we should think about abandoning Route 156 and let the state have a problem with it. But I want to know, if we decided to take such a drastic measure, when does that happen? Does it have to go to regular town meeting? What's the process, or can we have a special town meeting to do
Well,
that?
if you are you talking about making it private?
No, I'm telling the state, you own it. We don't have anything to do with it. Because it's 156, and they're telling us because of local traffic, we own it. And I'm saying, no, it's Route 156. You made it a state road.
Right.
So you're responsible for it, not us. You have to play blink with these guys.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that
Just if you
question.
would think about it, and let's talk about it some. But it's a case that they said, no, you need to pay this. When I was in Rangeley, or worked on Rangeley on the Quasic Road, we basically told them, we're just gonna ban it. And it reminded me, and all of a sudden, there was funds available. And we had a really nice conversation about it.
So they have told us that there are funds available through the,
Right, and that we have to pay the other half, so what
we
we were
pay
able...
40%.
So what we were able to negotiate in Rangeley is that we did in-kind services, which we kind of talked with John a little bit about, is that we would have our trucks and our crew available to help out with what we could do, as long as they were there to direct us to what we needed to be done. And I get the impression that conversations you had were, no, you had to pay cash. No, maybe we don't pay cash. So that's something I'm going to find out when I meet with him. with Russell, but I just want to have a question that's asked, because they're holding us responsible for something that's a state road. And the fact that local traffic uses it, it's not my problem. Put a toll.
And a lot of time, like, for example, in Kingfield, Rangeley, some of those state roads are not your actual routes. So most of the time, I don't think the actual routes do this particular program. But others, like Main Street, would be one that would be harder for us to argue for them to do.
I wouldn't disagree with Main Street. I
Yeah.
do with 156.
Right. So I don't know how to answer your question.
So
on that.
just be thinking about it, but I'll be able to report better once Russell gets that meeting set up.
Okay.
And John, we're gonna try to ask if it's all right with Rhonda for you to come to that meeting. I think you've already been once, but want to bring you to the unique experience of dealing with state government. And I think our road committee chair, who's our road committee chair?
But we don't actually have a chair,
Okay,
but there's.
a couple that may want to
actually
invite one of them to
too.
come along too.
All right, we'll move on to executive session.
I move we go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A personnel.
Can I have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?